Hello everyone. Today I want to give you a simple challenge, one that can change the course of your life if you dare to accept it. Every day, from the moment you open your eyes to the moment you fall asleep, there's a conversation happening inside your mind. Most of the time we don't even notice it. It feels automatic, like breathing. But make no mistake, you are always listening to yourself. And the words you choose, whether consciously or unconsciously, are shaping who you feel, how you act, and ultimately who you become. Think about it. If a friend follows you around all day, whispering the things you say to yourself, would you still want to be friends with them? Would you feel inspired, strong, and courageous? Or would you feel small, discouraged, and defeated? For many people, the honest answer is uncomfortable. We speak to ourselves in ways we would never dream of speaking to someone we love. We criticize, we belittle, we doubt, and we shame ourselves, often for the smallest mistakes or perceived flaws. Over time, this inner dialogue becomes the lens through which we see ourselves and the world. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious mind is a powerful force, a river running underneath our awareness, directing our lives unless we bring it to the surface. Your self-talk is part of that river. You are always tuning into it, and it is always influencing your sense of worth, your decisions, and your emotional state. It becomes your expectations about life. It determines whether you take risks or retreat, whether you show up fully or shrink back into fear. Now consider the opposite. Imagine if, for just 3 days, your inner voice became your greatest champion instead of your harshest critic. Imagine waking up and hearing words of encouragement instead of doubt. Imagine facing challenges and hearing a voice inside you say, "You're doing your best. You're learning. Keep going." That simple shift could change your energy. It could change your courage. It could change the way you interact with everyone around you. Because self-talk doesn't just affect how you feel internally, it radiates outward. It influences your posture, your expressions, your confidence in a meeting, your patience with loved ones, your resilience when things go wrong. When you are constantly feeding yourself words of fear, anger, or self-loathing, you project that energy into the world. But when you feed yourself words of hope, patience, and strength, you step into a different version of yourself. A more open, capable, and magnetic version. The truth is, you cannot escape the voice in your head. It travels with you everywhere you go. So why not make it a voice that uplifts you? Why not make it a voice that you would want a best friend to have? This is not about lying to yourself or pretending that life is perfect. It's about choosing a tone of voice, a spirit of compassion, encouragement, and belief, even when you're facing hard truths or difficult circumstances. It's about recognizing that the way you talk to yourself isn't just background noise. It's a force that's actively shaping your reality. You are always listening. The question is, what do you want to hear? And even more importantly, what do you want to believe about yourself after hearing it? If you talk to yourself with hope, belief, patience, and encouragement for even 3 days, you will start to feel the difference. You will see how much lighter, stronger, and more resilient you can be. And once you taste that power, you won't want to go back to the old way of speaking ever again. Inside every one of us, there lives a voice. Sometimes it's loud and dominating, sometimes it's quiet and whispering, but it is always there, shaping how we experience life, how we see ourselves, and how we move forward. What many people don't realize is that this inner voice can either become their greatest enemy or their greatest ally. And the difference between those two realities depends entirely on how you choose to speak to yourself. When your inner voice becomes your enemy, life feels like a battle. Every mistake feels like a failure. Every setback feels like proof that you are inadequate. You doubt yourself before you even try. You question your worth in the middle of your victories. You fear that you'll never be enough, no matter how much you accomplish. This critical voice doesn't just hurt your feelings, it limits your actions. It convinces you to stay small, to avoid taking risks, to protect yourself by not even trying. Over time, it drains your energy, your creativity, and your courage. On the other hand, when your inner voice becomes your ally, everything shifts. Challenges don't disappear, but they don't seem as overwhelming. Mistakes don't destroy you, they become stepping stones. Fear doesn't paralyze you, it becomes something you can face and walk through. An encouraging inner voice doesn't tell you that you're perfect or that nothing will go wrong. It tells you that you are capable, that you are learning, and that you are strong enough to handle whatever comes your way. This isn't about being unrealistic or sugarcoating life. It's about understanding that the relationship you have with yourself, the way you speak to yourself, directly affects your resilience, your decisions, and your overall quality of life. If you treat yourself like an enemy, you constantly tear yourself down. But if you treat yourself like an ally, you build the kind of inner strength that no external circumstance can easily shake. Carl Jung once said that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. But in adulthood, the greatest burden we often carry is the unlived life inside ourselves, the dream strengths and possibilities we never allow to surface because of the way we talk to ourselves. Negative self-talk builds walls around who we could become. Positive self-talk knocks those walls down, brick by brick. You might wonder, does changing your self-talk really make that much of a difference? The answer is yes. Studies in neuroscience show that the brain is highly adaptable, a concept known as neuroplasticity. The more you practice a pattern of thought, the more deeply wired it becomes. If you continually feed yourself doubt, you strengthen those neural pathways. But if you start feeding yourself encouragement and belief, you begin to reshape the way your brain processes experiences. Imagine carrying a coach inside you instead of a critic. A coach who pushes you, challenges you, but ultimately believes in your potential. A coach who reminds you that even when you fall, you are still worthy of getting back up. That kind of inner voice isn't a luxury. It's a tool for survival, for thriving, for living a life that reflects who you really are. For just 3 days, talk to yourself like an ally, even when you're frustrated, even when you fall short, especially when you feel like giving up. Choose words that build instead of words that break. Remind yourself that you are not the voice of your fears. You are the voice that decides whether those fears define you. In 3 days, you might not fix every old wound or reverse every old habit, but you will start to feel a shift, a sense of inner companionship, a spark of strength you didn't know you had. And once you feel that, you'll realize that the greatest partnership you'll ever form is the one you build with yourself.
What you repeat, you become. It's a truth so simple that many people overlook it. Yet, it explains why our thoughts, especially our self-talk, have such a profound influence on our lives. Whatever words you feed yourself day after day, whatever beliefs you rehearse in your mind, they don't just stay as background noise. Over time, they become your reality. They shape the way you see yourself, the way you behave, and even the limits you place on your own potential. Most people think of habits as actions, brushing your teeth, exercising, or checking your phone, but thoughts are habits too. The way you talk to yourself follows a pattern. If you constantly repeat words like, "I'm not good enough," "I always mess things up," or "nothing ever works out for me," those statements start to carve deep grooves in your mind. They become automatic. They feel true not because they are true, but because they've been rehearsed so many times that they seem real. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." In a deeper sense, you are also what you think, especially the thoughts you repeat without questioning. Your self-talk creates a blueprint for your behavior. If you consistently tell yourself you're bad at relationships, you'll likely act distant or defensive without even realizing it. If you repeat the idea that you're unlucky, you'll find yourself giving up easily or missing opportunities. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, but here's the good news. Just as negative self-talk can become a destructive habit, positive self-talk can become a powerful, life-changing one. If you start to repeat messages of encouragement, belief, patience, and resilience, you lay down new tracks in your mind. You start to build new grooves, new habits of thought that empower rather than diminish you. At first, these statements might feel uncomfortable, maybe even fake. That's normal. You've spent years, maybe decades, practicing the old way of speaking to yourself. Changing that won't feel natural immediately. But stick with it. Repeat the words anyway. Over time they begin to settle into your mind. They become familiar, and eventually they become part of your identity. The key is repetition. You don't just think a new thought once and expect your life to change. You think it again and again, especially when old doubts creep in. You train your mind the same way you would train a muscle, with consistency, patience, and practice. And with each repetition, you strengthen the belief in your own potential. It's also important to understand that this practice doesn't mean denying reality. It doesn't mean ignoring challenges or pretending everything is easy. It means facing life's difficulties with an inner voice that empowers you rather than paralyzes you. It means choosing to be a voice of support inside your own mind instead of a constant critic. What you repeat, you become. If you repeat fear, you become fearful. If you repeat courage, you become courageous. If you repeat patience, strength, and hope, you start to embody those qualities without even having to force it. For just 3 days, intentionally choose your words. Catch yourself when old, negative phrases slip out. Replace them with something better. Speak to yourself as someone who believes in your worth, even when you stumble. What you repeat will start to take root. And as it grows, you will too into someone stronger, calmer, and more fully alive. One of the greatest myths people believe is that being kind to yourself makes you weak, lazy, or complacent. They think that if they aren't hard enough on themselves, if they don't constantly criticize and punish every mistake, they'll stop growing. But the truth is the exact opposite. Kindness to yourself doesn't make you lazy. It fuels real, lasting growth. Think about it. Growth, whether emotional, intellectual, or professional, requires risk. It requires stepping outside your comfort zone, trying new things and sometimes failing. If your inner voice responds to every stumble with harshness, blame, and shame, how willing will you be to keep pushing forward? Probably not very willing at all. Instead, you'll start avoiding risks. You'll start playing it safe to protect yourself from your own self-criticism. You'll shrink instead of expand. But when your inner voice is kind, when it encourages rather than attacks, something powerful happens. You become more willing to take chances. You recover faster from mistakes. You feel safe enough within yourself to stretch, to reach, to dare. Kindness builds the foundation you need to endure the inevitable discomforts of growth. It's like a safety net that allows you to climb higher, knowing that if you fall, you won't destroy yourself with blame, you'll catch yourself with compassion. Carl Jung spoke often about the importance of facing and integrating all parts of ourselves, not just the parts we like. True self-growth doesn't come from rejecting our weaknesses. It comes from acknowledging them with honesty and care, and then working through them. Being kind to yourself when you're at your lowest, when you've made a mistake, lost your temper, failed an exam, or been rejected, is not a way of excusing bad behavior. It's a way of creating the emotional resilience necessary to try again. Self-compassion doesn't mean avoiding responsibility. It doesn't mean ignoring your faults or pretending you're perfect. It means holding yourself accountable in a way that is constructive, not destructive. Instead of saying, "I'm a failure," you say, "I made a mistake and I can learn from it." Instead of saying, "I'm worthless," you say, "I am struggling right now, but I still have value." Notice the difference in tone. One approach shuts you down, the other keeps you moving forward. This is critical because true personal development is not a straight upward climb. It's a winding, messy journey full of progress, setbacks, breakthroughs, and disappointments. If you only support yourself when things are going well, you'll give up the moment life gets hard. But if you practice self-kindness, especially during the hard moments, you develop endurance. You build emotional muscles that help you withstand the storms. For just 3 days, try offering yourself the same grace you would offer a dear friend. When you mess up, don't lash out internally. Instead, say, "That was hard, but I'm proud of myself for trying." When you fall short of your expectations, don't call yourself names. Remind yourself, "I'm human, growth takes time." At first, it may feel unfamiliar. If you've spent years criticizing yourself, kindness might seem awkward or even unearned. But trust the process. Every time you respond to yourself with patience instead of punishment, you rewire your mind. You create a new habit, one that supports your highest potential instead of sabotaging it. In the long run, kindness to yourself isn't just nice. It's necessary. It's the fuel that keeps you on the path of becoming who you are truly capable of being. It's the quiet, steady force that helps you rise again and again, no matter how many times you fall. 3 days may not seem like a long time. In the grand scheme of life, it's just a blink. But 3 days is enough to start a shift, enough to break old mental patterns and awaken a new way of being. When it comes to self-talk, the constant, often unconscious way you speak to yourself, 3 days of intentional change can open a door to a different inner world, one built on encouragement instead of criticism, strength instead of fear. Why 3 days? Because change begins with awareness, and sustained awareness, even over a short period, can reveal more than you expect. For most people, the voice in their head has been running on autopilot for years. They aren't even conscious of how often they tear themselves down, question their worth, or expect failure. By committing to just 3 days of consciously uplifting self-talk, you interrupt that autopilot. You stop being a passive listener to your mind and start becoming an active participant in shaping your thoughts. 3 days of new self-talk gives you a direct experience of what's possible. Instead of just reading about positivity or hearing motivational advice, you feel the change inside yourself. You notice how much lighter your body feels when you're not carrying the weight of harsh self-judgment. You experience how much more energy you have when you aren't draining yourself with fear or shame. In just 3 days, you start to see that your inner world, and by extension, your outer actions, can be different. And this matters because the small shifts you make internally ripple outward into your life. When you speak to yourself with kindness, you become more willing to try new things. You make decisions from a place of confidence rather than fear. You handle challenges with more resilience because you're not simultaneously fighting an inner war against yourself. Even subtle changes, feeling slightly braver, slightly more patient, slightly more hopeful, compound over time into massive transformation. Carl Jung once wrote about the concept of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming the person you are truly meant to be. Part of that journey involves breaking free from the voices that have been implanted in you, voices of doubt, fear, criticism, and choosing your own voice. 3 days of intentional self-talk is a step on that path. It's a small but significant act of reclaiming your own mind. Of course, after 3 days, you won't have completely rewired your brain. Lifelong habits aren't erased overnight. But that's not the point. The point is to prove to yourself that change is possible, to show yourself that you have more power over your inner world than you believed, to ignite a momentum that can carry you forward far beyond those first 3 days. During this time, it's essential to be fully committed. Set reminders if you have to. Write positive statements where you'll see them. Catch yourself when old, negative scripts try to creep back in, and when they do, because they will, don't get discouraged. Simply notice and redirect your thoughts back to encouragement. It's not about being perfect. It's about being intentional. Remember, 3 days can start a shift that lasts a lifetime. What begins as a small experiment can turn into a way of life. A life where your inner voice isn't your greatest obstacle, but your greatest source of strength. So, trust the process. Trust that even a few days of focused effort can begin to dismantle years of old patterns. Talk to yourself with the kindness, belief, and encouragement you deserve, and watch how, little by little, your whole world begins to change from the inside out. When you change yourself, you don't just change how you feel, you change the trajectory of your entire life. What you tell yourself repeatedly and consistently becomes the foundation of your beliefs, and your beliefs shape your choices, your relationships, your goals, and ultimately your destiny. This is why the simple practice of talking to yourself differently, even for just a few days, can create ripples that last a lifetime. Your mind listens to you. Every word you speak inside your own head is a seed planted in the soil of your subconscious. Negative self-talk plants seeds of fear, doubt, and limitation. Over time, those seeds grow into barriers, invisible walls that keep you stuck in the same patterns. You stop reaching for opportunities. You hesitate to show your true self. You settle for less because somewhere deep inside, you've convinced yourself you don't deserve more. But when you change your self-talk, when you choose to plant seeds of encouragement, belief, and strength, you begin to grow a different kind of inner landscape. You build pathways of courage, trust, and hope. You open doors instead of closing them. You start to see possibilities where before you only saw obstacles. It's not magic, it's the natural consequence of giving yourself permission to believe in your own potential. Carl Jung taught that what we resist in the unconscious eventually dominates our life and appears as fate. If you unconsciously repeat negative stories about yourself, they will manifest in your reality. But if you consciously choose to tell a new story, a story of resilience, growth, and Worth, you reclaim your power to shape your life intentionally. You stop being a passive character in a script written by fear and begin to be the author of your own journey. It's important to understand that this transformation doesn't mean you'll never have doubts again. You're human. Fear will still whisper to you sometimes. Old patterns might resurface. But with conscious self-talk, you create a new center of gravity within yourself, a place of stability you can return to even when storms come. You learn how to recognize the voice of fear without letting it control your actions. You learn how to respond to setbacks with encouragement instead of defeat. When you change the way you talk to yourself, you also change the way you relate to others. You become more compassionate because you understand how powerful words are not just the ones you hear from others, but the ones you give to yourself. You stop needing constant validation from the outside world because you've built a steady source of validation within. And ironically, as you need less approval, you often find yourself receiving more genuine connection because people are drawn to those who radiate inner confidence. All of this begins with a decision, a simple but profound choice to speak to yourself differently, to interrupt old patterns, to plant new seeds, to believe that you are worthy of encouragement just as much as anyone else. 3 days of speaking to yourself with kindness, hope, and belief can begin this transformation. 3 days of intentional self-talk can create a new baseline for your mind, one you can build upon day after day, year after year. It may start as a small shift, almost imperceptible, but over time it grows. And as it grows, it carries you closer to the life you were always meant to live, a life where your inner voice isn't a prison, but a pathway to your highest self. So don't underestimate the power of your words, especially the ones you say when no one else is listening. Talk to yourself like you would to someone you love. Build yourself up with patience, with hope, with strength. Your future self, the one living the life you dream of, is listening, and it starts with what you choose to say today.